we move on to influenza or the flu vaccine. Should be easy, right?
Should be so easy. The vaccine has been out for so many years.
Decades. Longer than I've been alive, right?
Likely. When was the first year
of the flu vaccine? We're about to find out how old I am.
It was developed for military use during World War II. So it is older than a lot of people.
It might be older than our parents.
It is, actually.
Not only is older than me, it's older than our parents.
So influenza started very similarly to COVID. They talked about safety, epidemiology, vaccine update, and then they listed the proposed recommendations for the 2025 to 2026 influenza season.
And in this, they really focused on, who, like with COVID, who is the most ill from the flu. And similarly, it's the young and the old. I'm not going to say the very old. I'm just going to say the
older.
Our
parents are in that group. The young, wise, over 65 group.
Yeah, like the new 50, which is 65 and older. So these are the groups that experience the most morbidity and mortality from the flu. And one concerning thing is that this past year, we had a pretty bad flu season. It was ranked as high severity for all age groups with the highest disease burden that there had been in the last 15 years. And across the country last year, 250 kids died of influenza. And about 90% of the kids who died from the flu were not fully vaccinated. But don't worry, Dr. Malone had something to say about this.
He said, quote, "Let's acknowledge this is a modest number."
What? 250 kids, about 90% of whom are not vaccinated against the flu, are dying of the flu. And you're saying that's modest? I understand that there are a lot of children in America, and that might seem like a small number. But that is a stunning amount of grief for what is a vaccine preventable illness.
That number should be 0. There should be 0 preventable deaths in children. And so the fact that you're accepting 250 makes me wonder, what is the number that you think is concerning? How many preventable deaths is acceptable? Because it should be 0.
How many kids do you want to see die of the flu, of measles, of COVID before you decide that it's the right time to do something? And just let us know what that number is. And when that number of children have died in this country, then maybe we'll change vaccine policy. That just seems so backwards. The point of these vaccines is to keep that number low.
Oh, don't worry. He is on the working group for the flu vaccine, and we'll be working on the flu vaccine in more detail for the months to come. He made lots of statements during this time period, including, quote, "I wanted to highlight that the flu vaccine is free of human fetal tissue derivative."
Was anybody asking?
He asked it as a question and then reiterated that he was highlighting this because people are worried about it.
Never heard anybody be worried about that. That was a weird thing to say.
It's a super weird thing to say. Super weird thing to say.
Another weird place that they really got hung up was on thimerosal.
Yeah. So half of the time dedicated to influenza was dedicated to thimerosal in vaccines, which we have talked about before.
So thimerosal is a preservative that's used in a small number of flu vaccines. And basically it's something that's added to certain types of flu vaccines to just help it last longer.
So there was a presentation on thimerosal that was made by Lynn Redwood, who we talked about earlier because her presentation likely was not vetted by the CDC.
Oh, this is the one with the fake citation.
Yeah, this is the presentation with the fake citation. So she's the former president of the Children's Health Defense, that vaccine advocacy group that RFK Jr. was a part of. And she started her presentation by saying, "I'm a citizen. I don't represent any group." So I'm like, how did she manage to get a spot where all other public comments were 3 minutes? How did she manage to get a presentation? And it's that she secured a spot on the schedule after being appointed to the CDC advisory role by RFK Jr. specifically.
Oh, cool.
So no conflicts of interest at all.
None.
So she gave this presentation on thimerosal, and there's a lot of history about thimerosal, which we've talked about in the past.
There was the hoax saying that thimerosal was part of what could cause this autism link, and we review that in detail in our vaccine autism hoax episode. But essentially, thimerosal has been removed from childhood vaccinations in America just out of caution, even though this was a hoax and there is no link.
So her presentation goes on about neurotoxicity and other claims about thimerosal in vaccines, all of which has been debunked previously. And it's important to note that thimerosal is used in a very, very, very small fraction of vaccines. So in the 1990s, when there was this concern that maybe thimerosal could lead to neurotoxic effects, manufacturers voluntarily removed it from vaccines, all childhood vaccines, and the majority of vaccines given to adults.
So although there was never any established link, there was a period of time that it was being investigated. And during that period of time, it was removed from all childhood vaccines. And now it's not even in vaccines. And yet this remains a big source of conflict for some reason.
Spend hours on it at this meeting, despite the fact that about 96% of all flu vaccines in the US are thimerosal free in the last year. And the concern is really about pregnant women. Like if you don't know that you're pregnant and you get the flu vaccine, and they calculated that in 2024, it was about 0.3% of pregnant women received vaccines with thimerosal. So we're talking about a very, very, very small percentage. My favorite quote of the whole meeting comes out of this. Dr. Meisner, the only ACIP member that had previously been on the ACIP, said, "I'm not sure how to respond to this presentation. This is an old issue that has been addressed in the past." He goes on to say, of all the issues the ACIP needs to focus on, this is not a big issue. He states that I think it's important to note that there is no study that has ever indicated any harm from thimerosal. He talks about the fact that thimerosal is in most vaccines that are given globally because we're so fixated on what happens internationally, and ends up being the only person, spoiler, to recommend continuing vaccines with thimerosal in them.
That's right, because the issue about thimerosal is not so much about America, since it's been removed from the vast majority of vaccines given in America, but it is still used as a preservative for vaccines that are distributed globally.
So it's used in multi-dose influenza vaccines. So if you have a large bottle that has like 10 doses in it, that's when there's thimerosal in it.
And that helps preserve it, and that helps people in more rural areas, in harder to reach areas, have access to a flu vaccine. So when they're debating this and ultimately, like Alicia says, vote to remove thimerosal from vaccines, that is going to affect the global distribution and availability of vaccines more than it's going to affect anything in the United States.